At the Africa Labour Research and Education Institute of the ITUC Africa, we have been engaged with a number of projects that have some fundamental underpinning, the reasons why we are doing what we are doing. We believe that inclusive growth that would expand our economies must be inclusive growth that is, number one, broad-based, that is pro-poor, that is green in nature, so that it is not a linear growth pattern, but then it is a circular economy model. And then, that inclusive growth is also organic. It grows like a tree. And when it grows like a tree, everybody in the society benefits. It benefits the marginalized in our communities. Specifically, we are talking about the women in our communities, youth, and persons with disabilities. So at AURI, we have tackled this in a multiplicity of approaches. One broad-based approach is trade. And as the African Development Bank noted in its report, one of the biggest problems or challenges to inclusive growth on the continent is regional integration and trade. And we have seen that manifest in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So what ITC Africa is doing through the sponsorship and partnership with our partners from Finland, SASK, is we are building the capacities of trade unions on the continent to be able to speak to national trade policies. And when they do that, and they are part of the national implementation committees that is the functional structure for AFTA, then the workers' voice would be heard. In so doing, we would have that social justice with this new social contract that we are talking about, which is going to be non-discriminatory. It is going to be expansive to make sure that all people are participating in this economy and nobody is marginalized or left out of this inclusive growth. And another big project that AURI is undertaking is one with our partners to make sure that Africa is able to come out from this cyclical debt crisis. Because you see, the debt overhang that we have is such that debt servicing affects government expenditure on health, on education, and on social protection. And so if we're able to tackle the problem this way, we are hopeful that we will have that inclusive growth for all. In driving inclusive, sustainable growth in Africa, we must first look at the financing mechanism, that architecture colonially inherited that is not making us progress. Because you see, the informal sector, which accounts for about 90% of the employed or even underemployed or unemployed in our economies, come from the informal sector. And therefore, we must tackle that economic structure, that dual economic system that we have. So structurally, there is a problem. And so we must look at that structure to be able to come up with African economic growth models that is center to the way we are growing and distinct from the neoclassical, GDP growth pattern, so that we are talking about genuine economic growth that is inclusive, that is worker responsive, that has minimum wage, as a factor, that has living wage as a basic factor, that has decent work at the center of it. In a nutshell, we are seeking for the new social contract. And that new social contract is all-encompassing so that we have that social justice that we all yearn for. Finally, we must have a human-centered economic approach or economic model so that workers are the ones that are going to benefit ultimately from trade, from regional integration. Therefore, our policies should be human-centered. Growth is a quantitative figure. It is an output that is heavily reliant on statistical data. Development, however, is a qualitative, comprehensive data that encompasses aspects of the society, the social aspect, and the environmental aspect, not just an economic statistic. Therefore, we should be developmental centric. If we do that, then we will be making sure that the human being, the African worker, is at the center of the economic growth and decent work that we all yearn for. And that will lead us into the Africa we want for the future. In shaping this social contract, we are very happy to see the ILO, through the statement of the Director General, to have a new social contract that works for social justice. And so we want to continue to see the ILO move in that direction. We want to see more tripartite deliberations, specifically through social dialogue. We want to see social dialogue strengthened, consultation strengthened. We want to see the worker organizations at the center of these negotiations, because you see, we cannot talk about labor, we cannot talk about workers and have laws designed for workers without worker representatives in the room. And therefore, to have that social justice that we are all seeking, we must have that tripartite system. The social dialoguing must continue, and we believe we can in the future come back and look at the statistics again if we have followed this procedure. Lastly, the SDGs continue to be our guide. With the years rolling in, coming to the end of the SDGs, we must focus on that global accelerator program so that most of our countries can catch up. The poverty is somewhat real, not even somewhat, it's very real. If 433 million Africans continue to live in extreme poverty, and which is some 40% of population of Africa, if the 15% of Africans who are persons with disability have a greater constituency of that section of the population, which is some 70% of persons with disabilities living in poverty. If we have women who form 50% of the labor force in agriculture, if we have that 50% majority holding only 15% of land titles, it tells you we have a big problem. And therefore, the SDGs, which is our guide, which seeks to eliminate poverty, which seeks to use decent work to propagate all the other SDGs, must have a renewed focus. Issues of climate change, issues of human and trade union rights, issues of social protection, issues of equality, issues of climate change and just transition must be at the center of the new social contract so that Africa is liberated from this cyclical poverty.